What if the man you helped every single day became the reason your entire life changed forever? Imagine losing your job, struggling to raise your daughter alone, and still choosing kindness over anger. Today's story is an emotional journey of compassion, sacrifice, and an unbelievable twist that proves good deeds never go unnoticed. If you enjoy inspiring stories like this, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories every week. Now grab your coffee, sit back, and let's get started. Ethan Brooks was 34 years old and lived in a quiet neighborhood on the west side of Cleveland, Ohio. His small rented house was far from perfect. The paint on the porch was fading, the roof leaked during heavy rain, and the old wooden fence leaned slightly toward the sidewalk. Still, it was home. Every corner of the little house held memories of the life Ethan had built with his 8-year-old daughter, Lily. After losing his wife in a tragic car accident 4 years earlier, Ethan had promised himself that Lily would always feel loved, protected, and safe. He worked long hours at a warehouse to pay the bills, but every morning before work, he prepared Lily's breakfast, packed her school lunch, braided her hair as best he could, and walked her to the school bus with a smile that hid his constant worries. Life had never been easy for Ethan. His paycheck barely covered rent, groceries, electricity, and Lily's school supplies. Most months ended with only a few dollars left in his bank account. Instead of complaining, Ethan found happiness in simple moments. Watching Lily laugh over pancakes on Saturday mornings, reading bedtime stories together, or planting flowers in the tiny front yard reminded him that wealth was not measured by money. His neighbors knew him as a quiet, respectful man who greeted everyone with a warm smile. He rarely talked about his own struggles because he believed everyone carried invisible burdens. If he could make someone else's day a little brighter, then his own problems felt smaller. Only 3 houses away lived 82-year-old Eleanor Parker. The elderly widow had spent more than 50 years in the same white wooden home where she had raised her family. Time had changed everything around her. Old friends had passed away, neighbors had moved, and her children had settled in different states. Most days, the house remained silent except for the ticking of an antique clock and the soft music she played on an old radio. Arthritis made every movement painful, and climbing stairs had become nearly impossible. She refused to move into a nursing home because every room in that house carried memories of her late husband. Although many people felt sorry for her, very few actually stopped to help. Ethan first met Mrs. Parker nearly 2 years earlier during a heavy snowstorm. He noticed her struggling to shovel the thick snow from her driveway while gripping an old metal shovel with trembling hands. Without saying a word, he parked his truck, took the shovel, and cleared the entire driveway before heading to work. Mrs. Parker tried to hand him $20, but Ethan smiled and gently pushed her hand back. "Keep it," he said. "Maybe just make me a cup of coffee someday." She laughed for the first time in weeks, invited him inside, and served him warm coffee with homemade cookies. That simple morning became the beginning of an unexpected friendship that slowly changed both their lives. From that day forward, Ethan checked on Mrs. Parker every single morning. Sometimes he carried grocery bags from her car. Other times he changed light bulbs, repaired loose cabinet doors, cleaned fallen leaves from her yard, or fixed a broken faucet. If he noticed her mailbox overflowing, he brought the letters inside. During winter, he shoveled snow from her walkway before sunrise. In spring, he planted colorful flowers beneath her front windows because she once mentioned they reminded her of happier years. He never accepted money, gifts, or favors in return. For Ethan, helping her felt as natural as breathing. He simply believed that if his own mother had ever needed help, he hoped someone would have done the same for her. Lily adored Mrs. Parker as much as her father did. Every Friday afternoon after school, she ran across the street carrying drawings she'd made in class. Mrs. Parker proudly displayed every picture on her refrigerator with colorful magnets collected over decades. Together, they baked chocolate chip cookies, played old board games, and listened to stories about what Cleveland looked like when Mrs. Parker was a little girl. Lily often called her Grandma Ellie, and the elderly woman never corrected her. Instead, she smiled with tears in her eyes, because those words filled an emptiness that had existed for years. Ethan watched their friendship grow with quiet gratitude, realizing they were healing each other's loneliness without even knowing it. Despite these joyful moments, Ethan's own life grew more difficult with each passing month. The warehouse where he worked had recently hired new management focused entirely on cutting costs. Employees whispered nervously about layoffs during lunch breaks. Ethan tried not to worry because he had always arrived on time, worked overtime whenever asked, and never complained about difficult assignments. Even when his back hurt after lifting heavy boxes all day, he reminded himself that Lily depended on him. He believed hard work would protect his future. Unfortunately, life often ignored fairness. The rumors became louder every week, but Ethan continued doing his job with the same honesty and dedication that defined every part of his character. One cold Monday morning, before leaving for work, Ethan noticed Mrs. Parker struggling to carry several grocery bags from a delivery driver. He glanced at the clock and realized he was already running late. For a brief second, he considered driving away. Then he looked at the elderly woman trying to lift a heavy bag of canned food with shaking hands. Without hesitation, he parked, carried every bag into her kitchen, organized the groceries inside her cabinets, and made sure she had enough bottled water. Mrs. Parker thanked him repeatedly, apologizing for delaying him. Ethan simply smiled and said, "People matter more than schedules." He hurried back to his truck, unaware that those few extra minutes would soon affect the rest of his day. As Ethan drove toward the warehouse, he silently hoped everything would somehow work out. He had no idea that life was preparing a challenge unlike anything he had faced before. Yet even with uncertainty waiting ahead, one thing remained unchanged. No matter how difficult his own circumstances became, he would never stop helping someone who needed him. That simple choice, repeated day after day without expecting recognition, was quietly leading him toward a future he could never have imagined. The following Tuesday began like every other workday, but Ethan had no idea it would become one of the hardest days of his life. After dropping Lily at the school bus stop, he drove to the warehouse with a cup of black coffee in one hand and hope in his heart. The parking lot felt strangely quiet. Employees gathered in small groups, whispering to each other with worried expressions. Inside the building, supervisors walked through the aisles, carrying folders instead of clipboards. Everyone sensed something was wrong. Ethan tried to ignore the tension and focused on unloading shipments, believing that honest work would speak louder than rumors. Around mid-morning, an announcement echoed through the warehouse speakers. Several employees, including Ethan Brooks, were asked to report to the conference room immediately. The room was filled with nervous faces. Human resources representatives sat beside senior managers, each wearing the same practiced expression of sympathy. A woman politely explained that the company was restructuring because of declining profits. Dozens of positions were being eliminated effective immediately. Ethan listened quietly as his name appeared on the list. His chest tightened, but he remained calm. He accepted the envelope containing his final paycheck and severance information without arguing. Deep inside, however, he felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. Outside the building, Ethan sat alone inside his old pickup truck for nearly 20 minutes. His hands rested on the steering wheel while countless thoughts raced through his mind. Rent was due in less than 2 weeks. Lily needed new shoes before school started again. The electricity bill was already overdue, and there was barely enough money left for groceries. He wanted to scream, but he knew it would solve nothing. Instead, he closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and reminded himself that his daughter depended on his strength. No matter how frightened he felt, Lily deserved to see hope instead of fear when he walked through the front door. That afternoon, Ethan picked Lily up from school with the same smile he wore every day. She excitedly talked about a science project while showing him a gold star on her homework. Ethan listened carefully, refusing to let his own problems steal her happiness. At dinner, he made macaroni and cheese, pretending everything was normal. Only after Lily fell asleep did he sit alone at the kitchen table and begin searching online for new jobs. He submitted application after application until well past midnight. Although exhaustion filled his body, he refused to give up. Every rejection would only mean trying one more place the following morning. Over the next several weeks, Ethan attended interviews across Cleveland. Some employers promised to call but never did. Others offered jobs paying far less than he needed to support Lily. Every evening he returned home disappointed, yet he never allowed bitterness to change who he was. Before doing anything else, he still visited Mrs. Parker. He mowed her lawn when the grass became too tall. He repaired a loose porch railing before someone got hurt. He changed the batteries in her smoke detectors and carried heavy laundry baskets downstairs. Mrs. Parker noticed the tired look in his eyes and gently asked if everything was all right. Ethan simply smiled and replied, "I'll figure it out." Mrs. Parker sensed there was more to the story. One afternoon, while sharing tea in her cozy kitchen, she quietly asked Ethan why he had been coming over earlier than usual. After a long silence, he admitted that he had lost his job. The elderly woman looked heartbroken. She reached across the table, gently held his hand, and thanked him for continuing to help, despite carrying such heavy burdens himself. Ethan shrugged with a warm smile. "You still need someone to check on you," he said softly. "Losing my job doesn't change that." Tears filled Mrs. Parker's eyes because genuine kindness like his had become incredibly rare. A few days later, Mrs. Parker developed a high fever and felt too weak to leave her bed. Ethan immediately drove to the pharmacy, picked up her prescription medicine, and returned with homemade chicken soup. He checked her temperature, organized her medications, and stayed until she fell asleep comfortably. Before leaving, he cleaned the kitchen, washed the dishes, and left a handwritten note reminding her to drink plenty of water. He expected nothing in return. To him, caring for another person during difficult times was simply the right thing to do. Unknown to Ethan, someone important had been trying to reach Mrs. Parker that very same week. Mrs. Parker's grandson, Daniel Carter, had been traveling constantly because he had recently become the CEO of the same national logistics company that owned Ethan's former warehouse. Although Daniel called his grandmother often, months of business meetings had kept him away from Cleveland. Feeling guilty, he decided to surprise her with an unexpected visit. He flew into the city early one rainy morning and drove straight to her neighborhood. When he arrived, he noticed fresh flowers planted beneath her windows, neatly trimmed bushes, and a spotless front yard. Everything looked surprisingly well cared for, despite his grandmother's age. Curious, he wondered who had been helping her. The following afternoon, Ethan prepared another container of warm soup after hearing Mrs. Parker still wasn't feeling well. Rain poured steadily as he hurried across the street, carrying an umbrella in one hand and the food in the other. He climbed the familiar front steps, knocked gently, and waited for the door to open. Instead of seeing Mrs. Parker's warm smile, the door slowly revealed a tall man in an expensive navy suit. Ethan immediately recognized him from company meetings held months earlier. Standing in front of him was Daniel Carter, the CEO whose restructuring plan had cost him his job. Both men stared at each other in complete surprise. For several long seconds, neither of them spoke. Daniel recognized Ethan as one of the employees affected by the layoffs, while Ethan wondered why the powerful executive was standing inside Mrs. Parker's home. Before either man could ask a question, Mrs. Parker slowly walked into the hallway using her cane. She smiled warmly and said, "Ethan, come in. I'd like you to meet my grandson, Daniel." The room fell silent. Neither Ethan nor Daniel realized that this unexpected meeting was about to reveal a truth that would change both of their lives forever. Ethan stood quietly in the doorway, still holding the container of warm soup. Rainwater dripped from his jacket onto the welcome mat as he looked from Mrs. Parker to Daniel Carter. The silence felt almost uncomfortable. Daniel's eyes remained fixed on Ethan, trying to understand why a former warehouse employee was standing on his grandmother's porch with homemade food. Mrs. Parker noticed the confusion on both faces and laughed softly. "Don't just stand there," she said. "Come inside before the soup gets cold." Ethan stepped into the house, placed the container on the kitchen counter, and politely greeted Daniel with a simple handshake, despite everything that had happened between them. Mrs. Parker insisted they sit together at the dining table. She poured fresh coffee into 3 old ceramic mugs and smiled warmly. Daniel watched as Ethan automatically reached for the sugar jar and medicine organizer without being asked. He reminded Mrs. Parker to take her afternoon pills before drinking her coffee, exactly as a caring family member would. Daniel looked surprised. "How do you know all of this?" he asked. Ethan shrugged modestly. "I stop by every day," he answered. "Sometimes she forgets her medication, so I help her remember." Daniel slowly looked at his grandmother, who nodded proudly with grateful eyes. Mrs. Parker began telling stories that Daniel had never heard before. She explained how Ethan had shoveled her driveway during a blizzard, repaired broken furniture, cleaned gutters, planted flowers, and even fixed a leaking kitchen sink without ever accepting payment. She spoke about the evenings when Lily visited after school to keep her company, and the weekends Ethan spent mowing the lawn before going to job interviews. Daniel listened quietly, as one story after another revealed a side of Ethan no performance report or employee file could ever capture. Every word made him realize how little he truly knew about the people who worked for his company. Daniel finally asked the question that had been troubling him since opening the front door. "If you lost your job because of our layoffs," he said carefully, "why did you keep coming here every day?" Ethan looked at Mrs. Parker before answering. "Because she still needed help," he replied calmly. "My problems didn't change hers. She shouldn't suffer because my life became harder." The simple answer filled the room with silence. Daniel had expected anger, resentment, or blame. Instead, he found compassion from a man who had every reason to walk away. For the first time in years, Daniel questioned whether success meant more than financial results. After leaving his grandmother's house that evening, Daniel couldn't stop thinking about Ethan's words. During the drive back to his hotel, he replayed every conversation in his mind. He remembered approving spreadsheets that listed employees only by numbers, salaries, and positions. Never once had he considered their families, sacrifices, or character. Ethan's quiet kindness exposed something Daniel had ignored for too long. That night, instead of preparing for his next business meeting, he opened Ethan's personnel file. The record showed perfect attendance, excellent performance reviews, and countless positive comments from supervisors. There had been nothing wrong with Ethan's work. He had simply become another number during restructuring. The following morning, Daniel called the Human Resources Director before sunrise. He requested a complete review of the recent layoffs and specifically asked about Ethan Brooks. The director confirmed Ethan had been one of the company's most dependable employees. Daniel immediately arranged a meeting at corporate headquarters and personally called Ethan with the invitation. Ethan assumed it was another routine interview with little chance of success, but he accepted politely. He borrowed his only suit from the closet, polished his worn shoes, and asked Mrs. Parker to watch Lily after school. He drove downtown with mixed emotions, uncertain whether hope or disappointment awaited him. When Ethan arrived at the Modern Glass headquarters, he expected a short meeting. Instead, Daniel welcomed him into a large conference room overlooking the Cleveland skyline. There were no lawyers or human resources representatives waiting inside, only Daniel and 2 cups of coffee. The CEO stood, extended his hand, and sincerely apologized. He admitted that while the layoffs had been based on financial reports, they had overlooked the value of dedicated people. "A company can replace workers," Daniel said quietly, "but it cannot easily replace character." Ethan listened respectfully, never interrupting. He appreciated the honesty, though he had not come expecting an apology or special treatment. Daniel then placed a folder on the table and slid it across to Ethan. Inside was an offer for a newly created position as operations team manager. The role included a significantly higher salary, full health benefits, paid training, and flexible hours that would allow Ethan to spend more evenings with Lily. Daniel explained that he wanted leaders who inspired others through integrity, rather than authority alone. Ethan stared at the papers in disbelief. For weeks he had worried about paying rent, buying groceries, and keeping the lights on. Now an opportunity greater than anything he had imagined was sitting in front of him. His eyes filled with grateful tears. Before Ethan signed the contract, he asked one important question. "Why me?" Daniel smiled gently. "Because my grandmother reminded me that leadership begins with serving people," he answered. "You helped her every day without expecting recognition. That's exactly the kind of person this company needs." Daniel also announced another surprise. The company would launch a community volunteer program, encouraging employees to spend paid volunteer hours assisting elderly neighbors and families in need. The initiative would be named the Eleanor Parker Community Care Program in honor of his grandmother, whose life had inspired a new purpose for the entire organization. Several months later, Ethan's life looked completely different. The new job allowed him to provide a comfortable home for Lily while still having dinner with her every evening. Mrs. Parker's garden bloomed brighter than ever because Ethan and Lily continued visiting every weekend, proving that kindness had never been about receiving rewards. Daniel often joined them, grateful that one unexpected meeting had changed his understanding of leadership forever. Looking across the colorful garden, Ethan realized that the greatest blessings often arrive quietly. A simple act of helping an elderly neighbor had opened a door no amount of ambition alone could have unlocked, proving that genuine compassion always leaves a lasting legacy.